Welcome to Extra Takes, hosted by Northland Church Lead Pastor Dr. Joshua Laxton. Join us each week as Pastor Josh reveals the rest of the story behind his sermons. We'll discuss how those who follow Christ can live out a biblical vision for the church in our world today.
Well, hello, Northland family and friends. Welcome to another episode of Extra Takes. I am your co-host, Pastor Josh, along with Matt Shiles, who just turned 40 years old.
I did.
Yesterday. How's that feel?
On Sunday.
On Sunday?
Woke up a little sore. No, it feels great. From what I've heard, everybody in their 40s, they welcome me to the club.
They welcomed you to the club.
Yeah. So
okay. Well, welcome to the club.
Thank you. I have a theory that once you get into your 30s, there's maybe a little bit of hesitancy. By the time you're in your 40s, it's just like, let's go. Let's bring this on.
Yeah. I guess I've spent almost 2 years in the 40s.
Yeah.
Yeah, bring it on. Bring it on. I mean, because I don't necessarily view myself as in my 40s. I always feel younger than what I am. It's so funny. Well, it was so funny. Like, where was I? It was this past. So I did a wedding this past weekend. Uh-huh. So I'm sitting at the table with some people, and two teenagers were sitting there, and they said, "How old are you, Pastor Josh?" I said, "Well, let's play a game. How old do you think I am?"
Yeah, that's fun.
So one said 26.
Oh. And
one said 36.
Oh.
And I'm like, well, hey, I'll take it. But 26, I'm like, good night. Like, do I really look that young? But nevertheless, I'm like, sure.
That's
That's probably what I feel like. I actually feel like a 26-year-old, probably.
Yeah.
But it's when I get up in the morning and it's like I limp to the bathroom, I'm like, well, I'm no longer 26. I don't think I was limping when I was 26. Yeah, I'm like trying to hobble, and it is funny. But so I know if you're in your 50s, 60s, 70s, don't give me a hard time next time you see me, because I don't want, or tell me how you get to the bathroom.
Yeah.
So
you just wait.
You'll be crawling to the bathroom. Whatever.
I did have someone tell me a couple weeks ago, and I was like, yeah, I'm turning 40. Oh, I wish I was turning 40. So I appreciated that perspective.
That's so funny.
Yes. So this week we're in week 2 of the Church in a Divided Democracy.
Got to breathe. Yeah.
Just got to breathe.
Week 2.
Man, it has. It's already been jam-packed because every week there's 2.
There's 2.
There's 2. So we've already done 3 and 4.
You're basically condensing an 8-week series,
right,
into 4 weeks, and giving general overviews of the topics and not in depth.
Sure.
Or not a full sermon.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. So this was June 8th and 9th. Let's do the outline and then we'll jump in. We had those 2 talks, but before you even got into the first talk, you gave a substantial amount of time into the overview of last week. So you gave a whole overview of the last week, talking about the divided states of America, talking about the spheres of influence, talking about the majority of the U.S. population is still Christian, which I thought was fascinating to point out. Then you got into the first talk. In a Christendom and post-Christian culture, we need to embrace a prophetic witness. So you gave us 4 ways to do that. That's prophetic existence, prophetic duty, prophetic message, and prophetic voice. Then that second message was all about thriving in exile. And you took us to Daniel, and you gave us this thriving in exile kit, which I thought was great. So you talked about a sponge, an alarm, a seed, a passport, a compass, and a potted plant. Mm-hmm. So we're going to get into maybe not all of those, but definitely some of those. Before we get started, I noticed that you brought more resources. Yep. So last week we had 22 resources.
Wow, you counted. Wow.
I did.
Oh, nice.
As you were talking, I spent time and counted.
Yeah.
This week, and you said, hey, we didn't even have them all, right? And these are specific resources that you're using for this series,
that I've used. Right? Well, so
not just in general, but for this series.
When people's like, "Man, you put a lot of work into it," I have, but I want you to understand, like, this isn't like even 6 months worth of prep. I mean, this has been what I've been studying for the last 15 plus years.
Yeah.
Like, so this is very much part of my PhD is what is mission? What is the mission of God? And how do we engage an environment, and particularly a North American environment that in some sense is divided.
Yeah.
And so all these resources have been resources that I've read over the years that I felt like have been helpful to me. Like this is one, it's just the Age of Enlightenment, because I keep talking about the Age of Enlightenment. And then if you hand me that
this one.
Yeah, because and then the other one too underneath, because these are interesting because this is called The Madness of a Crowd, The Madness of Crowds by Douglas Murray. So this is not this is not a believer, but he's actually talking about the kind of cultural tension in which we're feeling, and in some sense how the majority of the population is being force-fed things that they don't even believe. And then this one is called Cynical Theories, How Activist Scholarship Made Everything About Race, Gender, and Identity, and Why This Harms Everyone. So again, these aren't even believers, but they kind of give you a backstory to, in some sense, these personal, and when I say ideologies or values that are now being pushed in what I would call a secular Enlightenment mindset, because what these are, they're actually rooted in the Enlightenment, but now when I say they have become secularized, God has been removed and the individual has now become the center. And so that's where you get that's where you get a lot of this stuff. And so I just want people to be aware of where it came from. Now again, this idea of the Age of Enlightenment, you have to understand that when the Enlightenment happened in the 1700s, it happened within a Christian environment, in the sense of, Christendom, that's where the church is the center of culture. I mean, it happened in a Christendom environment. And that many of the early Enlightenment thinkers, they actually were believers. And so this, this notion of the advance, think about even the Gutenberg press and the rise of technology there. Again, like Martin Luther's going to use the Gutenberg press to create the copies of Scripture in the heart language of the people. So this is very much, the technological advancements that you saw early on in the Age of Enlightenment. Again, you have believers at the center, but over time, 100, 200 years down the road, that they're kind of thinking, many of now the Enlightenment leaders are kind of thinking, well, do we even need God? We got science, we got reason, look how smart we are. Like if we continue to go down this road, man, we will create a perfect society. We will create a utopia.
Wow.
And so that's where God was replaced as the center, with man as the center. And so then in the 1900s and now the 2000s, this has set in. That mindset has set in.
Yeah.
And that's why I thought it was so important to show once again the 7 spheres of culture and how almost all of those cultural spheres, who occupies the seats of power in those spheres, a secular Enlightenment ideology.
Yeah.
Well,
and it's so interesting. It reminds me back to the diagram, the faith diagram, and what's the center of the faith. Because when you're talking about the Enlightenment, human reason gets put to the center. Well, faith in God wasn't just kicked out immediately. It was just moved out of center.
Yeah.
Right, which is dangerous, right? Because he's still there, right? And he's still in a box and kind of in life and in the center, but not at the center.
Yeah. Well, you just explained the American experiment. So God's not the center of America, even though He is used. He's used, and Judeo. And here's what I mean by Judeo-Christian values: is Judeo is obviously Jewish, So Old Testament would be the Jewish or the Hebrew scriptures. The New Testament, which is written in Greek, and it was written to, in some sense, both Jew and Gentile, but you have it predominantly being spread among, in some sense, the Gentiles. And again, written in Greek. So Judeo-Christian values is this combination of both Old Testament and New Testament, which we would just say it's the Bible.
Sure.
As opposed to, Jewish scriptures and Gentile scriptures. We see the Bible as a whole, both Old Testament and New Testament. Now it's one book, 66 individual books. But what you have with the American experiment, the United States of America, is they're going to take Judeo-Christian values, so that are both in the Old Testament and New Testament, like human dignity, laws, all of that, and the Enlightenment values of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and individual rights, and freedom, and democracy, all of that, and you're going to combine them to create this. But what you've seen is this complete removal of Judeo-Christian values from a secular Enlightenment mindset. But what they don't realize, and this is what the scholar Tom Holland points out in Dominion and many of his talks. So again, he wasn't a believer, but now he has converted over the last couple of years. But he's saying that the secular Enlightenment mindset, they've thrown the baby out with the bathwater. You can't have human dignity apart from what the scriptures say. Like, where do you get that? Who's the one who comes up with that? And then how do you really define human dignity? Because if you sit there and say you want every human to be full of dignity and sacred, but you cannot say that's founded upon the image of God, well, then you get to pick and choose what you think is dignified when it comes to giving human dignity to people, because that's where you have abortion. Well, they're really not a person. Right. Or when you get euthanasia with older people who, well, you know what, they're not all there. If they can't be a contribution to society, might as well go ahead and kill them. Well, hang on. So you cannot have human dignity apart to some kind of authority that you're building it on. And so what he's saying is that even the concept of human dignity isn't something that a secular Enlightenment came up with. Sure. You can't come up with it, because in the history of civilization that hasn't happened until the church. Wow. So that's where he's going to point those things out. So you have a secular Enlightenment mentality that is taking Judeo-Christian values, removing God, and instilling their own. But in so doing, they are. It's the irony of it all.
And the foundation is shaky, and that's what we're seeing.
Because you get to pick and choose.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So any more of these? There's 12 more resources. Any more that you want to point out?
This is so Ed Stetzer. He's been here a couple times, a good friend of mine, a mentor of mine. He wrote a book in 2016, Christians in the Age of Outrage. I don't think it's obsolete. I think it's still very much relevant. But how Christians can bring our best when the world is at its worst. And so even that graph that I show in terms of the past and how there was non-Christians, there was a cultural divide, and then the Christian, kind of mainstream culture with all Christians, and then now the future where we are in. He's the one who created that image.
Man, I love that image.
Yeah, because I think it's very, I think it's very, very helpful in that because we convictional Christians are really just 25% of the population. We're not changing anything.
Yeah. Wow.
And that's part of what we have. We're not changing anything anytime
quickly.
soon.
Yeah, exactly. So before we dig into each of those talks, you did spend some time on last week, and I know that you've received feedback from this series so far, and you talked about it a little bit. My question is from the feedback, is the content more so new and foreign to people, or is it just a lot of content?
It probably is both.
You get a sense of it's both?
I think it's both. I mean, because I'm trying to process what I want to say. Because of my education and because in my educational pursuit I've studied this, I have a way of putting it together to present very complicated issues in a framework. But even if they're complicated issues, which they are, and you put them in a framework and no one's ever heard of them before, it can feel like a lot, and I don't know what you're saying.
Sure.
Which I do think that's actually part of the issue today in the church, is that we don't have people who can put these very complicated issues in a way that is trying to still be objective, without being one-sided.
Yeah, because the answer can't just be, well, let's just water it down.
Yeah.
I get the sense that you understand, and this isn't the only series that this has happened, but you understand that it's a lot, but you're still going to give us a lot, even if you know that a lot of people won't get all of it. It's still important to get the breadth of it.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's like any educational environment. I mean, sure, when high school students go into calculus the first day, they're gonna be stinking overwhelmed unless they have already a mathematician mind. Mm-hmm. I mean, my kids are overwhelmed.
Or taking 6 classes at once.
Yeah. I mean, so you've got to learn, but you do got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And I think, by having already done a mission and constantly talking about mission, you have at least some kind of, I hope, familiarity, but you also have new people coming on. But yeah, what you're trying to do is you're trying to take America, you're trying to take the Bible, and you're trying to explain a division, but also you're trying to explain how the church is engaging in this division, which, if you've not really ever talked about it, but you've only talked about, somebody hit the nail on the head, is that many times pastors or church leaders want to address the symptoms and not the root cause. What this series is doing is actually addressing root issues, not symptoms. Because these aren't voting issues. These are really issues of the heart of America and the heart of the church, and how do they in some sense intersect. And so the heart of America was never, and when I just be like, the heart of America was always founded in a way that it was still disease stricken because it was founded in a Genesis 11 type of world.
So the Tower of Babel. The
Tower of Babel, that every governmental system is flawed because it is created by flawed humans. Now, I'm not saying that, that a constitutional republic, there's not a lot of pros to it versus others. Like, no, I think, I would definitely argue there are a lot of positives to it, but I'm just saying that it's still a disease-stricken kind of environment, governmental environment, where the heart of the church is the center, is supposed to be the centrality of Christ and His kingdom, and how to give witness to it and be salt and light in the world. And so how does the church engage even a positive but yet disease-stricken governmental system that over time has in some sense become hostile to Judeo-Christian values? So the church isn't retaliating, and the church isn't being vitriolic and venomous with their words, but they're still maintaining the centrality of Christ and being salt and light in a world that in some sense has left them. I mean, that's the rub.
Well, and it is interesting because some of these concepts are foreign, but some of them are very familiar to us, because you talk about Christianity in America, and you talk about politics, and in some ways it's very much, it's the water in which we swim. And what you're pointing out is that over these years, the water has actually changed, and we haven't necessarily recognized it. So you're saying, hey, there's a new world we're living in, Christian, and that's what the second talk was about, right? Living as exiles, really, both of them. But so although some of these concepts, I think they're less foreign and more just challenging, because they are talking about the profound change that we have all experienced, and it's been hard to put into words.
Yes, that's good. I mean, it is hard to put in words, so I'm trying to give framework and words to put it in, and to challenge the existence of the church in America.
Well, and to answer the question, okay, where do we go from here?
Yeah.
Right? And that's where, like, although the living in exiles is not a fun concept to think about, it actually reimagines the church's purpose.
Yeah.
And that can be very exciting, right? To be a part of being set apart, not because it's easy, right? But because, for such a time as this generation of believers, like, we have an opportunity here.
Yeah. Well, and so the last verse in chapter 1 in Daniel says, "And Daniel remained there until the first year of King Cyrus." Cyrus was not a Babylonian. Okay, so he is a Medes Persian king.
Yeah.
So Daniel thrived through exile, outlasting the Babylonians. Let me tell you, the church will outlast if we can get back to being the people of God. But if we will fight the Babylonians like Babylonians, we will lose.
Oh, every time.
So that's where, I remember preaching a message here at Northland. This was back in our transition series, and I used Moses as the example. So Moses' life is divided into 3 40-year periods. Okay, the first 40 years he spends as a prince of Egypt. The second 40 years as the shepherd in Midian, and the last 40 years is leading the children of Israel out. But if you look at the last part of his first 40-year period, he had been raised as a prince of Egypt.
Yeah.
But yet there was this call on his life. He felt like there was this call on his life to deliver the Hebrews.
Yeah.
But he tried to deliver the Hebrews like an Egyptian, and he found himself in exile.
Yeah.
And so
it wasn't this whole existential crisis of who am I now?
Yeah. And so that's where we are. We are at this existential crisis as the church in America. Who are we? What is our identity? What is our duty? What is our message? What is our voice?
Wow.
We're trying to figure that out. And what we got to, and in some sense, it shouldn't be, actually literally should be a no-brainer to figure it out, because we got the Bible. How did the Jewish exiles, how did they get through it?
Yeah.
How did the New Testament? They were exiles. How did Jesus? He was in exile, because even when he came into the world, the incarnation came into when Rome was the seat of power over the region there. Paul, he's operating, for decades under Roman rule, under Babylonian captivity. So we just got to, in some sense, enter into the world of both the Old Testament and the New Testament scriptures to see how the church did flourish. Okay, but we're at that existential crisis, which is why I wanted to show, so the center of American life is no longer this tension between Judeo-Christian values and the secular Enlightenment values. It is very much swung, which is why, I'm wanting people to realize, we need to play the long game. We're not in a microwave moment. We're in a crock pot moment.
Yeah, I like that.
But if we can, and this is why I pleaded with the next gen, the Gen Z and the Alpha generation at the 11 o'clock hour, is we need you, because if the church can help people reimagine what it means to be exiles, and we can understand all of the spheres of culture and how we need to be training and equipping people from a discipleship standpoint to engage every sphere of culture under the lordship of Jesus, then 30, 40, 50 years down the road, I do believe we can see, at the very least, micro change in many of these areas, but it might be that we can experience macro change, because what I want to just remind people, which is why I showed that map, is that the Enlightenment started in the 1700s. It was the 1900s where a secular Enlightenment mindset kind of took a hold in many of these major institutions, like far as educational institutions.
Yeah.
And then over a period of 100 150 years, this kind of mindset began to infiltrate into every sphere of culture, which is why we feel the rub today, even though 68% of the American population has a Christian bent. They identify with the Christian religion. So what I'm trying to say is, if the church can begin to, if they want to reverse what's happening in the larger culture, they're going to play the crock-pot game. They're going to play the long-term game. Get back to doing what it means to be the people of God. Understanding, I'm just going to go ahead and give you a forewarning or even a commercial for the last message of this series. But when God, through the hand of Jeremiah, tells the exiles in Jeremiah 29 how to live, guess how he starts off? I want you to plant vineyards, build houses, and give your children in marriage. What is he saying? I want you to get back to doing the basics of what it means to be human. So if we can do the basic things of what it means to be human, but after the image and likeness of Jesus, we will then be producing disciples for every sphere of culture. And 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years down the road, we will be sitting at the seats of power if we play the long game. But if we play this game of wanting to argue, wanting to be vitriolic, wanting to be venomous, or wanting to shake our fist, we are playing a losing game.
Wow.
That's what I want to say.
Okay.
Thanks for letting me say that.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm not sure I could have stopped you if I wanted to. So let's look at, that's what I talk about. It's such a hopeful picture. It's a different picture.
It's a different picture.
It's a different picture.
And think about it. Sorry, but
yeah.
So it's a hopeful.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of tension, even stress, and almost even darkness, because in Jeremiah 29 also, you're going to be here for 70 years.
Yeah.
70 years you're going to be here.
Yeah.
Like, get comfortable.
Yeah.
So that's so that's when many of you want to put Jeremiah 29:11 on a graduate card, like, for God knows the plans He has for you. Like, that includes some dark pictures, dark images, So I get it, it's cute and cuddly, for I know the plans. But part of those plans are 70 years of exile in darkness and captivity. But you can thrive even in the midst of darkness.
Wow. And that's going to be the last message.
That's going to be the last message. I can't wait. Like
I know.
So yeah.
So in this first talk, in a post-Christendom and post-Christian culture, we need to embrace a prophetic witness. We talked about those four things.
Yep.
So under prophetic message, talking about prophetic edge, you said we must not lose this message. To lose the message of sin and grace is to lose our prophetic edge. What does a prophetic edge look like in our culture?
Like, so when I say a prophetic, so when you have two teams, right, and one has in some sense the game changer, but if they no longer have the game changer, everything they've lost their edge. Okay, so if we lose this message, we lose when I say our advantage, because we no longer have, because in some sense you can't have an existence and a duty without some kind of message that you are advancing.
Yeah.
And then what does the voice do if it doesn't have the undergirding of a message, right? So that's what I mean by if we lose the message of repentance, if we lose the message of sin and grace, because John 1 talks about Jesus came and He was full of truth and grace. If we lose the edge of that, or if we lose that message, we actually lose the very essence of what we have come here to announce.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's what I mean by that. So that's where I'm like, if we've lost our edge, we might as well just go ahead and close up shop.
Wow.
Because it doesn't matter if we have an existence. It doesn't even matter if we have a duty. And just so that, so for somebody asked us about what's a prophet. Well, just think about John the Baptist. John the Baptist was, in some sense, the last Old Testament prophet per se. Where he would dress a certain way, but he had this duty because God had called him out to kind of separate him from the people. He's the one who communicated. God is the one who communicated with his prophet. His prophet was supposed to represent him, speak on his behalf, to challenge people, to call his people back. And so when you look at John the Baptist as God's prophet who had this prophetic witness of an existence, of a duty, of a message, of a voice, well, what we are as the church, we are Jesus's prophet in the world. So that's what I'm trying, and what we're doing as an entity, as his body, the church, we are preparing the ground for his second return. So our second coming. What John was doing was preparing the ground for Jesus' first coming.
Sure.
Well, we're just preparing the ground for Jesus' second coming. Now, what was interesting and also spurred on this idea too is that in Jesus, and even in the Old Testament, and Jesus fulfills this in the Old Testament, but the way kind of God set up his leadership in the nation was there was going to be a prophet, priest, and king. So the king oversaw the life of Israel. You had the priest that oversaw kind of the spiritual life, and then you had the prophet that would also speak and call the people, kind of call the people to repentance, and use that prophetic voice, like you're wayward. So in some sense, Jesus, well, and not in some sense, but Jesus does. He fulfills all three offices, and he is the prophet, the priest, and the king.
It's amazing.
And so when you look at the church's existence, we actually occupy all. So Jesus is our king, so we're representing the king and his kingdom. He is our high priest, but yet we are a kingdom of priests that are mediating between God and the nations, and then we are the prophet that is declaring, "Thus saith the Lord." And so Jesus, he is the fulfillment of the prophet, the priest, and the king. And as his body in the world, we are giving a representation and a reflection of Jesus being the prophet, the priest, and the king.
Amen.
And so if we're going to live in the world as, in some sense as these kind of exiles, but being his prophetic witness, because he calls us to be a witness.
Yeah.
All right, so then this is what it means. We've got to adopt these elements if we're going to live as his prophet in the world.
Great. So for prophetic voice, I've got a fun one. You said the church has to call out Christian political leaders when their life is not in step with the gospel. You need to say something. Your silence is complicit in their unfaithfulness to the Lord. How do we do that? Like, practically, what does that look like? I mean, that's just a natural question that I thought about as I was being challenged by hearing that. How would we do that? Because you're not just saying, hey, that's just going to fall on you to do.
Yeah.
You're saying all of us, right? We have to do it in whatever sphere we find ourselves in. And I'm thinking it's probably you're not just talking corporately, you're probably talking individually with family, friends, all of that. So I was just wondering if you could expand on that a bit. Like,
oh, you want my political commentary, huh?
Well, I did, because you said it, and there's certain things you're gonna. That's a hard one to hear on Sunday, but we can go a little deeper here. Yeah. So but for real, how do we do that? Like, that's my question. I mean,
all right, so. If you, because
like if I'm a Democrat,
really
if I'm a
platform
Republican,
the platforms that we're really talking about, where a lot of people are silent and complicit, is social media.
Sure, yeah. So is that where you were talking? Yeah.
I mean that because we want to defend. Okay, so let's take this. Let's take those who are Republican or conservative, and in some sense they are right leaning. Do not defend Donald Trump for his immoral behavior when he says he's representing and fighting for evangelical Christians. Like, again, I'm not saying that you don't vote for him. Sure. I'm not saying that you can't, because I know that we have a lot of political activists here. And again, I hope people realize, and I think people are realizing, I'm not saying don't engage in this, but if you're wanting to defend somebody's behavior that is immoral and that is out of step with the gospel, but yet identifies with Christians, saying, I'm fighting for you. Like, all it just takes is like, I support his policies. I don't support his personal behavior.
Right. Okay.
Like, I mean,
Sure.
And then on the left, like Joe Biden, he's for killing babies. Like, but if you want to agree with, in some sense, his political ideologies, and in some sense get back to, you know, kind of really the issues of, in some sense, left and right in terms of the political, you know, way we would govern. Yeah. Like, say, I agree with these, but I do not agree with him killing babies and being so good with it. Yeah. Yeah. Like, I mean, because when you just, in some sense, defend a politician that wants to identify with evangelicals or Christians, but yet is for positions that are an antithesis to gospel living, but you don't call it out, you become complicit.
Yeah, and I think what you're getting at is, as believers, members of a different kingdom, we do not find our ultimate home in either party 100%. Yeah. Although we're still this is the messy middle, because we're still called to engage and we're still called to vote, and there are.
And I will say this: if somebody, well, we ain't called to vote. Well, just hang on, because in week 3 I'm going to talk about.
Oh, you're going to talk about that.
I'm going to. How do we leverage our citizenship?
Okay.
And then, who do we vote for? And I'm not going to tell you who to vote for, but I am going to offer 6 questions. I'm going to offer 6 questions that believers, based upon the Bible, ought to ask.
Because you used to go into churches, and they'd give you a handout.
They give you well, some churches would, yeah. Oh, yeah, they would. But yeah, so I didn't mean to cut you off there, but but yeah, because some people, well, I'm just going to abstain. Oh, well, sure. Listen, again, I'm telling you, the Bible would have us to engage. I mean, that's where you go back to Daniel. Yeah. And his friends. I mean, they are literally in the governmental environment. They are highly engaged. Yeah. They are participating in Babylonian government. They are working for Nebi himself. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, so let's really understand the context.
Yeah. You are. You're calling us to get a little more uncomfortable than we're used to.
Well, yeah, because again, I'm saying that you can support like whatever in some sense, these governmental policies that you want. Because here's the thing, I think it goes back, maybe we talked about last week, but okay, when it comes to immigration policy, I don't think that there is a black and white issue. Now, should there be policy? Absolutely. Should that policy be debated? Absolutely. You know, because I do believe in order. I do believe in structure. I do believe in processes. You know, but hey, let's debate those things. Yeah. You know, and so there's other things like tax policy. Let's debate that. Now, again, I'm not a political scientist, so I'm not. You know, but they're deep. When I say they're deeper conversations that we can have in those areas. But where Christians just need to make sure that they do speak out is, while I agree with these policies because I think that they're better for our nation, I disagree and I do not stand for the immoral character and behavior coming out of politicians. We ought to care about character is what basically I'm getting at.
Well, and I think the fear can be, okay, if we give an inch, then it hurts, you know, this party, and then it hurts the policies.
Then here's what I would say. Then we don't trust the sovereignty of God. Because Paul, I mean, he's going to get out in Romans 13 is subject yourself to the emperor. Well, God, gee, don't you know who the emperor is? Nero. Do you know what he stands for? Like, I mean, but God's like, he's my servant. Like and God's like, I'm ultimately in charge. So if you don't want to honor the emperor, you're actually not honoring me. Now, what we will look at this next week is what happens when the emperor that you are called to honor, what if he tells you to do something or she tells you to do something that is against the law of God? Just like what we saw with the food. Yeah. Is that, all right, I'm going to refrain. But I'm gonna start out by asking humbly, hey, can I refrain from this? But next week we will see the fiery furnace.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so, but that's where we got to get back, and I know this is the messy middle, and it is really hard to, like I'm telling you, I know it's really hard to trust the Lord in this, but if you're hesitating because I don't want to say that I'm against somebody's care, in some sense their immoral, or their immorality or their behavioral flaws, because some people might take that as, well, I'm just not going to listen, trust the Lord, but honor Him.
Yeah.
Like you're ultimately honoring the Lion of the tribe of Judah, not the donkey or the elephant. Like that's part of where if we get to the point where we toe the party line in totality, we will be crossing the line of our King.
Well said. So let's look at that second talk.
But does that answer your question?
It does.
Don't send me a negative email, please.
It does. You can forward it to me because I'm the one that poked the bear.
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, because it is, or like when you're
really,
around.
like you say that, and that's the question is, well, how do I do that, right? And sometimes sometimes we can't get into that, on the weekends, but like this is where we can get into it a little more.
I get, like I understand the notion. Well, we're not looking for a pastor in chief. No, you're not. But again, I go back to Proverbs. Is that righteousness exalts a nation, not just the nation of Israel. Righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. Listen, if we are not, because you have to understand, like the church in a society is the moral conscience of that society.
Yeah.
So if we lose our voice,
yeah, I think what's at stake is our witness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if we don't have that voice for those who want to identify, because that's where I go back to that first message last, like 2 weeks ago, where I said we don't need to be a political pawn. See, a political pawn will just be used for however the king or queen wants to move us.
Yeah. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
We are not a political pawn, and we're not for sale. But we have been treated as that for a while now.
Yeah.
And all I'm just saying is that part of our presence is while we engage, we do not become political pawns on either party.
Yeah, of course. All right, let's talk about this thriving in exile.
Yep.
We'll hit a couple of these. The thriving in exile kit. This first one, sponge. As a sponge, we're going to absorb what the culture pours on us, but we're going to wring out what is not pleasing to the Lord. Isn't that a dangerous game? Because if you do the first part, absorb what the culture pours on it, but if you don't wring it out...
Oh, yeah, I mean, so what do you mean by dangerous?
It's dangerous to our witness if we actually absorb it and then we end up this cultural assimilation game where we become like... as I'm looking at that, the wringing out part is where there takes a tremendous amount of discernment.
Okay, so you're right. But if you go back to Daniel, there were a lot more youths than just the 4 that we mentioned. But it was the 4 that we mentioned that were faithful.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, you are subject. And that's part of where, like, and this is another thing that I want people to realize, and I don't think the church realizes this. And this is part of where, I'm telling you, our culture is not going to be honest with this, but this is part of where when you study history, it's just the reality. Whoever is in power wants to stay in power. Mm-hmm. And one of the ways that they're going to thrive, or I say thrive, or to try and stay in power is to culturally assimilate those who are subservient. Mm-hmm. Because the minute that those who are subservient, that don't have the power, in some sense begin to buck against the power, and offer another set, like then there's the threat. Mm. So that's part of where, like, what's happening today, and this is where James Davison Hunter in his book Culture Wars, which I talked about last week, is that this whole idea of vision, the left and the right's vision, is that they want the seats of power to be able to be the ones that are advancing their vision for the nation. Because again, that there's no solidarity over one vision for the U.S., but different in some sense. When I say governmental policies per se, but no, there's this constant fighting over power so that they can be the ones pushing their vision for America. Well, here's Babylon. Here's our vision. And so one of the major ways that we can keep our vision intact is once we go conquer a people, then we can take those who are the cultural elites. So, because again, that's what we see here. So, the bring into the king's service some of the Israelites from the royal family and nobility. These are cultural elites. So, those 7 spheres, so these are the royal families, the noble families. They're going to take their kids and they're going to assimilate them into becoming good Babylonians who are Jewish. So, good Jewish Babylonians. And so only 4 of them, only 4 that we see in the book of Daniel, only 4 of them are ringing out that which is displeasing to the Lord.
So that's my point. That's the dangerous game. That out of all of those, only 4 of them actually do the ringing out.
Yeah, but look at what happens with when you look at what happens in the book of Daniel, and then even when you look at what happens in the church over time, it only takes. I mean, think about Jesus. I mean, now he's the king. He's the incarnate cosmic king. Only took him to die, and he was raised from the dead, and he changed the face of history. And then and then throughout history, it only takes a remnant. Only takes a remnant, because who's working through the remnant? The power of our king, our cosmic king's working through the remnant. So it is a dangerous game, and that's part of why I'm really I don't say concerned. I mean, concerned, sure, is that's why I said what I said, is that when you look at the 68% of the people in America that classify themselves as Christian, most of them aren't convictional. I mean, and so let's just be like, listen, you ain't going to change much. But those who get serious and those who are going to honor the Lord, even when it's tough, even when it's dangerous, even when it's risky, look at him work supernaturally. And that's what we saw in this. But yeah, the sponge thing is, and I mean, who's to say that you don't learn some things and that you don't utilize what you're learning from Babylon, and from the Babylonians for a strategic way of how you engage.
Of course, yeah.
So,
yeah, I mean, this is going back to the first week. You talked about different ways to engage culture, right? Part of me sees, well, I see the validity of just wanting to run away, right? Just running away from the Babylonian culture and staying totally separate from it. And this sponge method is, no, you are going into it. And the whole ringing out, I mean, there's obviously, I'm sure, a lot of things that are vital for that. Biblical literacy is just crucial, right? So those remnants, in order to ring it out, like, you have to know your scriptures, you have to know missiology, you have to know theology, like, you have to understand.
And yeah, it's not just enough to know, you've got to understand. Like, that's the thing, you've got to understand how, like, you got to, and this is part of where you got to understand the grand story of God. You've got to understand the context of these scriptures so that you can immerse yourself in there and then draw out application.
Right.
As opposed to just being able to quote scripture.
Right.
Because you could, I mean, Satan can quote scripture.
Yeah.
We've seen that.
We have.
So you can quote scripture to the point that you twist it, which Christians have been very known to do that throughout the history of America. Well, really in the history of the church, but nevertheless. But yeah, the sponge, because you think when you wring it out, you still have, the sponge is still wet. The sponge still has water in it. You haven't wrung it all out. So again, and that's part of where I want to just say that they don't buck against the system. Like they're not, again, they're being indoctrinated. Now, here's where understanding the rudimentary understanding of a government comes into play. We have every right to buck against what is being talked about today. See, in this kind of regime, they are an authoritarianism type of government where Nebuchadnezzar, he rules the day. Like he's the one that can decide whether or not you live or you die. So if you buck against his system, you dead. Okay?
Yeah.
So we live in a constitutional republic, a democracy, and so we have every right to exist in, when I say a marketplace of ideas and a marketplace of religion. But what I want you to know, though, is while we have every right to say what we also believe, what he's not doing, though, is he's not telling them how bad, how wrong they are for their beliefs.
Yeah.
And again, that's... Now, again, it's part of the rudimentary understanding of a government in which he lived, but this is part of where playing the long game plays a huge role. So that's why, I say, in short, we must be able to absorb our cultural beliefs, values, and practices using much of the knowledge we gain to partner with the city for the good of the city, but at the same time, we're able to squeeze out the cultural ways and practices that do not jive with Scripture. And so, again, we got to find ways, winsome and discerning ways to do that effectively in the democracy in which we live. But again, that's why I go back to those three pillars play such a huge role. You need to understand God's mission, and how does rough eschatology play in here? Well, you see that in Jeremiah 29. You'll be here for 70 years, and then something's going to happen.
Sure.
So there was the last thing, there was a theology of, hey, after a certain period of time, something's going to happen, and I'm going to come to your rescue. Okay, well, same thing here. We don't know how long it's going to be, but Jesus is going to come for our rescue.
Right.
But then the rudimentary understanding of government played a role so that they can navigate through that governmental structure and the cultural society in which they lived.
Great. So let's try to look at two more of these.
All right.
Seed and compass.
Yeah.
Seed, you say, we cannot be the moral police of Babylon. Lost people will act lost. They always have, they always will. And then you said the challenge of this generation of believers is to cultivate a convictional kindness in our witness as we address a world gone mad. And this is where you talked about the long game. We have to play the long game. The microwave moment has passed. We are in a crockpot moment. Oh, I think that's so good. When did the microwave moment pass? Was it like 30 years ago, or was it like...
Longer.
Really?
Oh, yeah, longer. Because, again, what we're seeing now is the fruit of pluralism.
Yeah.
And it was the fruit of when you embed it into, and this is part of the indoctrination, and that's why these books are so important, like the cynical theories. These were being touted in the 1800s, early 1900s, in terms of the foundation for it to evolve into the conversations that we are having today. Like when you think about the Scopes trial, the monkey Scopes trial in the early 1900s and 1920s. It was about evolution and creationism, okay? But then after, but what ended up happening is that in these public educational centers, in these universities, there was this shift. And so what has been in some sense advancing in our public higher educational centers has been a secular mindset. And that's where I'm saying, like, if you're going to, in some sense, want to change it, you got to play the long game. But that's part of where, it's a longer game now.
Yeah. Well, what this reminds me of is when studying missions history, there's these different eras of missions history, and they're never nice and neat. They actually overlap, right? And the fascinating thing is, in the overlap, you have people that are still doing it the old way, and then you have people that are doing it the new way. I feel like whatever we're in, whatever change we're in that overlap where for our entire life, we've like you said, no longer been in this microwave moment, but we've been, I think the church has been operating as if we're still in it.
Well, of course, that's part of the rub is that, again, when you're in the crisis mode, because nationally we're in a crisis mode, even subculturally as Christians, we're in a crisis mode. Things have greatly changed. We're worried about the kind of society that our children will be raised in, and so there's this crisis that is on our hands. And what do we tend to do in a crisis? We fight, we flee, or we freeze. Well, so what we have tended to, again, and this is what I showed in that graph, that image with James Davison Hunter. Some have had a defensive two posture. We're going to fight.
Yeah. And
many times Christians fight like hell for heaven, and again, you're going to lose. Then a relevance two, we'll just kind of join in. And have some kind of, in some sense, freeze type thing, and but we'll just focus on this, and then the flee, we're just going to retreat altogether. We're just going to withdraw, and we'll let the world go to hell in a handbasket and
make our own thing.
Yeah, and so that and that's part of where the faithful presence model that I am advocating for, that I do believe that the Bible, and again, I'm giving terms to what I see in the Bible. It's very messy, and it is complicated, and it's not just cut and dry. It is dangerous. It is risky. Sometimes you might look too much like the world. Sometimes you might not look at. There's always a risk to it. But this is part of where the books that I shared with the group last week, A Fractured Republic and A Confident Pluralism, how can we create solidarity within a pluralistic society? That's an important question. I mean, in some sense, that's the $1 million question. So for the church, how do we preserve our distinctiveness as the people of God, but yet give Babylonians, Americans who don't know Jesus, in some sense, rights that would even when it go against Scripture? And again, I know that's a hard question to wrestle with.
Yeah, it is,
because this is where I'm trying to say is that we're not calling people to be Christians. We're not calling them to in some sense be fully Christians morally. But what we want to do is maintain our moral distinctives as the people of God, while giving Babylonians rights to, in some sense, be immoral.
Wow.
The life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness without those are really complex ideas, and we haven't we have not had to so I was talking to somebody earlier today. All right, so take the Civil War, and in some sense take the civil rights movement. So yes, are these personal in some sense values? Yes, but they really are over political ideology. Of how is America going to be governed, and who is going to be given rights in America. Now, that's why I always go back to the Constitution preamble, is that to form a more perfect union. They knew up front that we were not a perfect union, that we needed to be perfected, we needed to grow. But but at the core, it really was a political ideology. How much power does the federal government have? How much power does the state government have? Our state governments, can the state government succeed? It was all of that. But underneath it was kind of some personal values of how do you treat people with dignity. Now, again, many Americans got that wrong. White Americans got that wrong, and many white Christians got that wrong in twisted Scripture, which we ought to lament and confess that even as the people of God, of what happened in our nation's history. But then even in the civil rights, okay, who has the right to, who has the right to vote? Who has but today, It really is, a lot of the divide. Sure, there's some political ideology in there, but they're really personal ideology. I have the right to do this. I have the right to do this. I have the right to be this. I have the right to marry this person. I have the right to, and it really is over personal values and how they play out in the political sphere. And again, I could be thinking wrongly about that, but that's how I kind of see that, and that's why these books are so important. It's like we didn't. It is a whole different shift. So how do we let Babylon be Babylon while maintaining our distinctiveness, but create a solidarity around a pluralistic culture?
Amen. A good question. Yeah, there's no easy answer to that question, but I think you're saying, hey, let's start wrestling with this.
Start wrestling with it. But the easy part, and here's what I do think the easy part at least is for we have a really good guide in how the church ought to live. So we don't necessarily have the blueprint per se how to navigate a democracy. Now,
Sure.
we would have a guide to navigate an authoritarian regime, because that's what Babylon was. That's actually what Rome. I mean, now Rome was a republic, and then it became an authoritarian when Julius Caesar did. He transitioned it. So there was this authoritarianism there, but the Roman Empire was so big, you had all of these, in some sense, sub-layers to it, per se. But there was still an authoritarian regime.
Yeah.
So we, in some sense, would have the blueprint of how to navigate an authoritarian regime. We don't necessarily have a blueprint for how to navigate a pluralistic, in some sense now, Babylonian society where the church actually does have some, when I say some power, when I say when I say political or social capital in a representative democracy. Does that make sense? Where that's where we don't necessarily have, quote unquote, the blueprint. So, which is why we're having to take these principles of faithful presence and apply them. But this is part of where we do have rights. And we do have, and this is what we'll talk about next week, just as Paul actually had rights as a Roman citizen, even though he lived in an authoritarian government. How do we leverage because our citizenship here in America is in quote unquote powerful, or way more powerful than other governments. Okay, so how do we leverage it for the glory of God and the good of our nation? So we'll look at that. So I think that we can get some principles that help at least be at least a signpost that, hey, we can move, we can start moving in the right direction.
Yeah, we're not starting from scratch.
But it's still a complicated issue.
Great. Good thoughts there. So let's end with this compass, this last one. You said, this is what I want to say to culture. This is great. Instead of force-feeding your food, let us eat what the Lord God wants us to eat. And then at the end of 10 years, let us see who's healthier.
Yeah, like who will have a
How would we do that?
Holistically better health, healthier lives, mentally, emotionally. Marriages would have healthier marriages.
Yeah.
And then families. Now, here's the thing that I actually think research like that exists. I mean, I've seen the numbers.
Well, yes, it does. It's interesting. I think there's research on both sides, but the delineation is convictional Christians. I think,
exactly.
Right.
And that's where
that's where it gets muddied a bit. Oh, Christians divorced at the same rate, and you'll have some of that, but when you're talking about convictional Christians, reading the Bible four times a week, all of that stuff, like that's where there's separation.
So for a younger generation who is in college, in graduate school, or even in postgraduate school, maybe you do a thesis, like a sociological thesis on that. You take 50, 100 families that are convictional Christians. Now, you would have to decide. You would have to decide what's. And there are other guidelines to what is a convictional Christian out there, and then what is a secular Enlightenment mindset, and then you come up with when I say a quantitative and qualitative study, and then you measure them at the end of so many years, and how healthy are they? I mean, but part of it is that the convictional Christians have to maintain their convictional Christianity.
Yeah, there's certain markers.
Not perfection.
That's where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah, well, that's why I said, we clap for it, but all right. will we be able to maintain it?
Yeah, that was a moment, because you called it. You're like, you ain't about to clap here, and it was like silent.
Yeah, well, I mean, because that's where the rub is that, we're trying. I mean, here's the thing: what's happening is that while in some sense the moral fabric of our nation is being ripped out from underneath us, I mean, really, how different is, when I say the church, from mainstream culture? And that's what we're seeing. That there's not much difference, but there is a difference in convictional Christians,
right?
That's where I would love to have more and more studies done, because we do know this. We know that Christians, we know that convictional Christians are more radically generous than secularists. We know that's research. That has been proven. We know that families are healthier, that pray together, that attend regularly church or even synagogue. That religion, in some sense. Having a religious center that is convictional actually does create healthier families versus none. Like here's another thing, and I got this email, and a bunch of us kind of got this email that there was somebody who wanted benevolence, and that that we rejected their benevolence because we have it's on our website. We have a benevolence policy where major benevolence like rent. If people have fallen on hard times, can't pay their rent or their mortgage, or maybe power. Like we're going to try to help our brothers and sisters through their tough time. We're going to meet with them, assess how can we help, and we will try to do as much as we possibly can. But we make that clear it's for Northland members. Well, this person in Dally, still filled out the application, and we talked to them. They were denied. They sent us a scathing email about the church doesn't help, all this, and called us cow. I mean, it was a really, really nasty email. And so I graciously, pastorally, responded to them, and gave them our policy once again, showed them that our staff did, follow the policy, that we would love to minister to you in another way, love to meet with you, hear where you are, love to pray over you, all of this. And then I just simply asked, I said, do you have because they had said, well, that we've served in church in years past, not at Northland, but in other places. But I asked them, are you currently connected to a church?
Yeah.
And they were honest enough. They said no. And I want to sit there and say, like, you want to badmouth the church for not coming to your rescue when you're not even investing in the church weekly or monthly. And then you want to badmouth the church. And so my point is this, is that healthy, I really think that if you really want to experience kind of a healthier life, and again, this is research proven, is that embed yourself into, even, and no faith community is perfect, but embed yourself into an imperfect faith community because it's going to help you be healthier holistically. So that was my point there, is that awesome. You're going to blame the church for doing something that you now aren't even doing.
Yeah.
You want them to treat you like family, but you haven't treated them like family. And I know that family members, we hurt each other. The church is imperfect, but don't blame the church when you. I mean, again, I'm beating a dead horse here.
Yep. So that was the compass, and fascinating conversation around convictional Christians and research that separates that that healthier holistically.
Yeah, and part of the compass too is and I did say this I know I said it in the 11, but will we trust the Lord as convictional Christians about our sexuality?
Yeah.
Like, will we? And this is even for my younger brothers and sisters, even for my kids and my kids' friends. Like, will we trust the Lord for our sexuality? Like, this is what it means to be sexually pleasing to the Lord. That sexual intercourse is reserved for marriage between a man and a woman. Will we trust the Lord maritally? That we're going to work through tough times. That even when even when we're not happy. Now, again, I'm not saying that if you're unsafe or you're being physically, verbally, I'm not saying stay in. But I'm talking about like I know this happens in Christian marriages. While I'm not happy, I'm leaving my spouse. Like, will we trust the Lord? Will we do the hard work of gospel living? Will we do the hard work? Will we trust Him vocationally? Like, I'm going to show up and I'm going to work like Jesus would have me work. I'm not going to fudge. I'm going to be a person of integrity. I'm not going to be, in some sense, bottom line centric in the sense of I'm going to try to build as much wealth as I possibly can at the detriment of injustice, right? Of greed. Like, I'm going to trust Him just like Zacchaeus trusted. And as John the Baptist was telling, hey, like don't exploit people. Will we trust biologically that we are truly fearfully and wonderfully made? That God did not make a mistake. Yeah. That I am I am who God made me biologically, but that is not my identity. My identity is in who the King says I am. That I am fearfully and wonderfully made. That I am a child of the King. That I am are we going to just trust Him? Are we going to trust Him financially? Are we going to trust Him to be radically generous even when we are going through periods of inflation where we have less margin financially? Will we still keep generous portions and margins for the Lord, right? Like, will we that's the compass that I'm talking about. Sure. Yeah. Like, the compass of God does not change with environments. That's the thing. Think about it. When Daniel and his friends were removed from Jerusalem and placed in Babylon, the compass of the Lord still was the same. North was north, south was south, east was east, and west was west. So that's where, even though we have changed in the year 2024, from 1776 in terms of morality, will we trust the Lord in the compass that He's given us, which is His Word, that does not change. It is the same today as it was yesterday and forever.
Amen. I think that's a great place for us to end today.
Well, Northland family and friends, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Extra Takes. I'm enjoying the series. Can't wait to worship King Jesus with you this weekend and be back next week for our third installment of The Church in a Divided Democracy. Blessings.
Thanks for listening to Extra Takes. Be sure to follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts so you won't miss a single episode.